Okay, so Halloween, right. You think you know it. I mean,
Yeah.
costumes, candy, the whole shebang. But we're going deeper here.
Yeah, way deeper.
We're talking ancient rituals, spooky history, you name it. We're using some seriously interesting sources for this deep dive. Like, we've got Wikipedia, of course.
Oh, that's it.
But get this, we even found this document about medieval torture devices.
That's where the real fun begins.
Oh, buckle up, because you're about to see Halloween in a whole new light.
What always gets me about Halloween is how it mixes, like, ancient rituals with modern-day partying.
Right. It's like this weird blend of facing your fears, but, like, with a goofy smile.
Totally.
How'd we even get here? From ancient harvest festivals to arguing over the best mini chocolate bar, all dressed up like, I don't know, zombie Spider-Man or something.
Only in America, am I right?
For real. But okay, let's back up. Wikipedia says Halloween is on October 31st. It's the eve of All Hallows Day, which is a Western Christian thing.
Right. But, and here's the kicker, it's way more complicated than just a Christian holiday. A lot of folks trace Halloween's roots back to these old Celtic harvest festivals. Specifically one called Samhain.
Samhain. Okay, so what's the deal with Samhain?
So picture this. For the ancient Celts, Samhain, it wasn't just about the end of the harvest, right? It was also the start of winter, a time when things get a little,
Spooky.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. They believed that during this time, the line between our world and the other world, this realm of spirits called the AOC, it got super thin.
Whoa, hold up. So spirits could just, like, pop in for a visit. That's wild.
You know it. And the Celts, they both respected and kind of feared these AOC. So they leave out offerings, food, drinks, that kind of thing to keep them happy, ensure a safe winter for themselves and their animals.
So like an ancient protection racket, but with spirits instead of some goons in pinstripe suits.
Pretty much.
Speaking of spirits, Wikipedia mentions this super funny Irish folktale. It's about this guy, Stingy Jack.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him. Bit of a troublemaker, that one.
Total trickster. He actually ends up tricking the devil not once, but twice.
Now that's impressive, even for a trickster.
So, to make a long story short, Jack dies. But because he was, well, a bit of a jerk, both heaven and hell are like, nope, not having it.
And the devil, being the devil, but also kind of a stickler for deals, right? He gives Jack a burning coal to light his way through the darkness.
And what does Jack put that burning coal in?
You guessed it. A hollowed-out turnip.
And boom, the jack-o'-lantern is born.
There you go.
Although back then, they were all about turnips in Ireland and Britain. It wasn't until Halloween made its way to North America that folks switched to pumpkins.
Probably a good call.
Right. Can you...
Oh, absolutely. But here's a fun fact. Trick-or-treating, it actually comes from a much older tradition called, get this, souling.
Souling. Okay, you're going to have to explain that one.
So back in the day, during All Hallowtide, that's the time around All Saints' Day, poor folks, a lot of times kids, they'd go door to door, right? But instead of asking for candy, they'd offer prayers for the dead.
Prayers for candy, that's a different kind of deal.
Right. And in exchange for these prayers, they'd get these little cakes called soul cakes. It was believed to help the souls in purgatory.
Wow, so instead of a sugar rush, they were helping souls find peace. Talk about a different kind of Halloween tradition.
It really makes you think about how these traditions, they change so much over time. I mean, going door to door, that stayed the same, but the costumes, oh man, talk about an evolution. We've gone from like basic ghosts and goblins to, well, anything you can possibly imagine.
So true, but those early costumes, right? The ghosts, vampires, witches, all that. It's like they were tapping into something deeper, something kind of primal.
Oh, absolutely. It all goes back to this idea of memento mori, which is Latin for basically, remember, you're going to die.
Right. A little reminder that life is short, cheery stuff.
It was a huge theme back then, especially in the medieval period. Art, literature, you name it. And these figures, the vampires, ghosts, skeletons, they all represent death, the afterlife, things people were really focused on back then. So Halloween costumes, they were kind of a way of facing those fears head on.
Wow, that's actually really interesting. But these days, of course, you've got everything from superheroes to, like, I don't know, a walking, talking taco.
Which just proves that traditions change, adapt. They take on new meanings, right? They blend with whatever's going on at the time.
Speaking of darker times, you mentioned earlier this document on medieval torture devices.
Oh, yeah, we're not suggesting we bring those back.
No, definitely not. But it's a good reminder that Halloween, it hasn't always been about fun costumes and candy. It has a darker side, too. There's this one device, the Scold's Bridle.
Scold's Bridle? What in the world is that? Basically, imagine this awful iron muzzle. right? And it was used mostly on women.
Women? Why women?
If they were considered, shall we say, too outspoken, talking too much, gossiping. If a woman dared to speak her mind, well, she might just find herself on the receiving end of this lovely little device.
I'm not liking the sound of this.
Yeah, it wasn't pretty. This bridle, it had a spike that would press down on the tongue. Made it super painful to talk.
Oh, that's just awful.
And the humiliation, that was part of the punishment too. They'd parade the woman through town wearing this thing.
It's amazing, and by amazing, I mean horrifying how much things have changed. Talk about a reminder to be grateful for things like, I don't know, free speech and basic human decency. But how do we go from Celtic harvest festivals and medieval torture devices to, like, mass-produced costumes and trick-or-treating?
It's quite the journey, right?
Right.
But you hit the nail on the head. There's this whole other side to Halloween. In the 20th century, that's when the holiday we know today really took shape. Commercialization, mass production of costumes, the focus on candy and fun, it all kind of exploded.
Right. It's like Halloween went mainstream.
Exactly. And here's the really interesting part. This Americanized version of Halloween, it actually circled back around and influenced celebrations in other parts of the world.
Wow. So it's not just a one-way street. Traditions go out, they get reinterpreted, they come back around. That's wild.
That's culture for you, constantly evolving. Halloween's a perfect example of that. It shows us how traditions can adapt, change, take on different meanings in different places.
Makes you wonder how many other traditions have gone through those kinds of transformations. But speaking of different cultures, Wikipedia mentions that Halloween, as big as it is, isn't really a thing everywhere. There are other cultures that have their own unique ways of honoring the dead.
Well, absolutely. Take Mexico, for example, and parts of Latin America. They have Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. It's not about being scared or anything, right? It's more about celebrating life.
Exactly. It's about remembering loved ones, honoring their memory, but in a really joyful way. Not about fear or darkness.
I've seen pictures of those altars they make. They're incredible. So colorful, full of life.
Beautiful, aren't they? Families decorate them with offerings, food, drinks, photos, anything that reminds them of their loved ones. It's a way to feel connected, even though those loved ones are gone.
You know, it makes you realize that this whole idea of remembering and honoring ancestors, it's not just a Halloween thing. It's something that connects us across cultures and across time. We just all have our own ways of doing it.
I love that you bring that up because it gets to the heart of what Halloween is all about. Underneath all the costumes and candy, it's about acknowledging our own mortality. It's about connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
It's true. And speaking of connecting with something bigger, we can't forget the Christian side of Halloween. It is the eve of All Hallows Day, after all. It's a time when the Western Christian Church honors all the saints.
And that brings us to another fascinating layer of Halloween. See, some Christians, they see it as Reformation Day.
Reformation Day. Now, I'm going to need some context for that.
Okay, so it all goes back to Martin Luther. He was a key figure in the Protestant Reformation.
Right. I remember learning about him.
So, the story goes, he chose October 31st, 1517, to nail his famous 95 Theses to the door of All Saints Church in Wittenberg.
Wait a minute. The same date as Halloween?
You got it. It's like Halloween has this built-in duality. You've got ancient traditions and religious history all mixed up in one.
That is wild. It's like a weird coincidence. So some Christians celebrate Reformation Day and others, they focus on Halloween. It's fascinating how one holiday can have such different meanings for people.
It really shows the complexity of faith and tradition, right? For some folks, Halloween is a celebration of their faith, a time for reflection, for remembrance. For others, it's a chance to just have fun with their community, let loose a little. And then you have those who, they're a bit more cautious about the whole thing, maybe even avoid it altogether.
So it's like a haunted house, but with a religious message.
Interesting. Yeah, you could say that. It's a way for some churches to, use Halloween as a way to reach people, share their beliefs. But it's important to remember, there are a lot of different ways to be a Christian, and not everyone's cool with Halloween.
Right. Some Christians aren't exactly fans of the whole Halloween thing, are they?
Exactly. Some just aren't comfortable with where it came from. All those old Celtic traditions, things they might see as pagan rituals, it can be a bit much for some.
It's pretty wild how one holiday can be so, divisive even within the same religion.
Well, that's faith and tradition for you. Complex stuff. For some, Halloween is about their faith, a time to think about things, remember people. For others, it's just a good excuse to have fun with their neighbors. And then there are those who, they'd just rather sit this one out.
I get it. It's not for everyone. But after going through all of this, from ancient Celtic festivals to medieval torture, from trick-or-treating to, well, pretty much everything in between, it really makes you realize Halloween is more than just a day on the calendar.
It really is. It's like a mirror, reflecting back all these different parts of us, our history, our fears, what we believe, even just our need to feel connected to something bigger.
It's like this strange mix of like pure fun and this deep down fear of the unknown.
Exactly. It's a time to look those fears in the face,
So,
even if it's just pretend, and find some comfort in the traditions we share year after year. And who knows, maybe those ancient Celts were onto something with that whole veil between worlds thing.
okay, now that's a little creepy, but I kind of like it.
Right. Halloween lets us be someone else for a night, to embrace the unknown, and really celebrate that whole cycle of life and death. It's a time for imagination, for telling stories, for remembering that the world is full of mystery.
Love that. So this year, when you're carving your pumpkins or trying to decide between being a superhero or, well, a giant taco, take a second to think about how far Halloween has come to get here.
It's a journey, that's for sure. And who knows what's next for Halloween? New traditions, new meanings. It's always changing.
That's the best part. It's always evolving, just like us. So this Halloween, while you're out there having fun, take a moment to appreciate everything that went into making it happen. And hey, if you happen to feel a little shiver down your spine, or maybe you sense something watching you from the shadows, well, maybe, just maybe, it's a little hello from the other world. Happy Halloween, everyone.